Why should voters in the 11th district give you another term?
I would think that they would want common sense governance, that they would like it from a center-right position, someone who lives in the district, understands the needs, and has shown the ability to cross the aisle, to do things for Michigan, such as we did with the auto industry. So I think that that's what they want. We know that jobs is the #1 issue. We know that in the past we've seen where I've worked with job providers to make sure that we try to get the economy stimulated through the private entrepreneurship and industriousness of the people as opposed to government spending. And I think now more than ever that type of common sense governance is what we expect and certainly need here in Michigan and America.
McCotter's hometown is Livonia, and it's home to several automotive plants. He worked with fellow members in the Michigan delegation to support the restructuring of Chrysler and General Motors.
I think that across the board, the support for the auto industry was critical. They had already made painful decisions. They've made more painful decisions to survive. And I think that what it points to, too, is not only the fact that we in Michigan understand that globalization has caused hyper-competition, it's caused families, businesses to restructure, become more nimble, more accountable. Government's going to have to do it, too.
Yet we see the size of government growing and growing.
Massive expansion of the federal government, the massive expansion of debt, and the pending increase in taxation that could happen December 31st if Congress doesn't act, is driving people to say, no, we want a check and balance in government. That does not mean that they necessarily think that the Republican Party has learned all of its lessons from the mistakes that it made. And I would caution Republicans or conservatives not to think that all of a sudden one election has redeemed you in the eyes of the voters, but they are very unhappy with what's coming out of Washington today. And I think in many ways, it, again, is they understand the changes that are necessary in families and businesses to get competitive and to be sustainable and thrive in the 21st century. And they know that big government placed on their backs is trying to perpetuate itself at a time that it can't. It's non-sustainable.
Democrats will say, we saved the auto industry, we've reformed health care, we've reformed Wall Street and the banks. Look at all the good that we've done. You would say?
Well, I agree with the goals, but I don't think, #1, the auto industry, let's not forget the first president that authorized the loan to the auto industry was a man called George W. Bush, who understood that the manufacturing sector in the United States could not be allowed to be decimated down to nothing. And that was handed off to President Obama, and President Obama continued that policy to try to help the auto industry restructure. That was a bipartisan loan from the administrations. And I think that, ironically, that mirrored the kind of cooperation we saw among Republican and Democrats in Michigan on this issue. Now, in terms of reforming Wall Street, the bill didn't do that. It allows them to continue to recapitalize, which means they're not going to put credit onto the streets. The failed Wall Street bailout did not free up credit to go on the streets. It has nothing to do with anything to clear out the toxic assets which caused the problem in the first place. And despite claims, it does not stop this too-big-to-fail garbage, which is not true. These banking institutions should have been allowed to be broken up, walled off, and allowed a decentralized credit system so that we do not have these big institutions being able to dry up the tap on credit, which is so necessary to job creation here in Michigan and elsewhere. As we know in the manufacturing sector, which is capital intensive, these firms out on Wall Street have not been helpful to us, are not going to be because of that bill. Again, they've been told to recapitalize. That means they keep the money. And in terms of when you talk about the health care reform, that was never passed with the consent of the American people. The American people continually did not want a huge one-size-fits-all, which is a government-run system when you go through it. Americans understood that the concept behind that health care bill was fatally flawed. Economics 101 says that if you want to lower the cost of something, increase the supply of it in a time of rising demand. If you try to control the supply and reduce the supply while demand goes up, costs shoot through the roof. This bill is an attempt by government to control the supply of health care to, quote-unquote, ratchet it down. At the very time people are living longer, advances in health, which are, I believe, salubrious to our society and to individuals, is going to continue to drive that demand. So you're going to have a situation where the costs are not going to go down by any economic stretch. And this was the underlying premise of this bill. So when people talk about they've reformed health care, the goal of reforming health care is a laudable one. But this bill and the policy and the philosophy behind it is only going to make it worse.
For Democracy 2010, Dave Llewellyn, Channel 7 Action News.